In this video, we're going to talk about episode 2 of Tony Gaskins' Single House, Communication, Gender Roles, and Equality. Now, this episode was filled with a lot of conversation. I took some notes and I'm going to be referring to them as we're going through this discussion, but I didn't realize how much we actually were talking and discussing the topics compared to episode 1. Because episode 1 was a little bit longer, but I definitely have a lot of notes to refer to. So you might see me looking over, but I'm really excited to cover this topic. As you can see, I felt a little bit more comfortable and was able to be a little bit more engaged in the conversation. But there was so much to learn from this episode, so I can't wait to recap it with you. So this episode starts off with us talking about creating a space where your partner feels comfortable to be able to communicate to you. And I kind of kicked off this conversation just with my thoughts about being able to share with your partner it's okay to go to therapy. But as you can see, I think everyone in the room felt that it's important that whether it is the man or woman, we create a space where our partner can come to us and be vulnerable and share their thoughts and concerns, and we can be available to be there for them to vent. My stance on that was, and you get to hear me thinking about that, but it is so important that we identify when our partners need to speak to someone else. And not only that, we shouldn't act as a therapist, even though it's not an official title, and we do want to create an environment where our partner can come to us and ask questions and vent and share. But at some point, when it becomes so much for even you and you don't have the capacity to take on anything else, even though you love them, I think it's okay and healthy to say, hey, I think that you should probably see someone, a professional that may be able to help you process this, to identify if there's a trigger, to help you heal through this. Because if you are in a relationship and you continue to kind of take on whatever your partner brings to you, especially if it's something that's a common theme, whether that's not the same person, but it could be basically the same situation, same script, different cast, I think it's healthy and okay to recommend that individual go to therapy. In this episode, you also see that the group is very willing to actually offer therapy at some point. So after I explained exactly what I meant as far as I'm not a dumping ground and you should go to therapy, but some of my castmates also agreed that maybe, they would offer to go to therapy with their partner. And with me going to therapy myself and learning so much, and even having this conversation with my therapist about couples therapy, the one thing you have to remember is, as a therapist, they can only tackle what if you go as a couple, a therapist cannot assess me individually. They're going to talk about what we're going through as a couple. So it's really important that you share, one, you have a good understanding of that too. But then also when it comes to just the conversation that we had in the singles house, and knowing that if you go to therapy with your partner, depending on what the situation is, you probably are not going to be able to be there and help them identify whatever that root cause is, because the therapist is only going to go so deep with, it's probably going to be more of the situation of discussing the communication and what you prefer as far as, hey, you continue to bring it to them and it's too much, and it's not really going to give your partner what they need. Individual therapy allows them to unpack those situations and then identify if there's a root cause, if there's a trigger, if there's trauma. And you won't be able to accomplish that with the therapy that you go together as a couple. So it was really a good conversation. I'm happy I had the opportunity to really clarify what I meant by that. And I do stand by it. I have friends who are married, and I say the same thing to them. You want to be able to communicate to your partner that you want to be able to create a space where they can come to you, but then also they identify when they need someone else, because when you love someone, you take on everything that they bring you. And one word that I really, really focus on, especially when it comes to my boundaries, is capacity. And some of us don't have capacity to take on more because we're all individually dealing with our own day to day. And if you're dating someone, be family and friends too, but if you're dating someone and or married and you feel like it's an opportunity to share with them to go and see someone else, I feel like why not? Because you can't unpack everything that they need, but you definitely can feel the weight of what they're giving you because you love them. And you can walk away from that conversation carrying everything that they've unpacked on you. So I truly still stand by that therapy is important. And it's important. You may not want to say specifically you don't want to be a dumping ground, but I definitely think it's important to communicate, hey, it sounds like you really need to talk to someone. You have a lot that's going on, and I don't think I'm in a position to give you what you need. I want to make it clear, everyone is always reaching out to hear advice. So I do often, I've in the past asked people like, what part do you want me to play in this conversation? Am I just listening, or you're looking for advice? So your partner may not even be looking for you to actually say anything, but taking that on can still be a lot. So I do still think it's important to be able to identify when you can recommend that, hey, maybe you should see someone to talk you through this so that you can heal or address whatever the root cause is, because you may not be the person to do that for them. Caleb brought up this really good point about when he's in relationships, he asks the individual, he asks the woman that he's dating, like, how do you want to be communicated? What's your love language? And I think that is so important as we were discussing communication and what that looks like. Now, I read the book Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman, and no, I was not aware of anything about the love languages until maybe a couple years ago. But it is so important when we're talking about communication. And Kim kind of led to this that, based on her background, she may communicate a little bit harsh. And she has friends who are, able to tell her that. But in any relationship, and even at work, I do this. Like, how do you like to be communicated? How do you like to be recognized? And I do think it's very important that as you have a partner, you identify that. And then if there is areas of opportunity where you need to really work on the communication, then you take the time to be intentional to do that. Now, I think it's very important that you take that time and invest in someone that you are actually in a relationship with to work through that. I know the question came up, and I believe it was Kim who asked about like what's the time frame when it comes to getting the communication right. And Sai was saying just, really you have to be intentional, and you give it some time and you don't see any improvement, but both parties have to put in the effort to actually want to get the communication right. And you know what, depending on the way you were raised, and the way that your parents communicated with you or whoever raised you, maybe you communicate a certain way and maybe it comes across harsh. Maybe it doesn't come across harsh. Maybe it's not effective communication. So I do think it is so important that both parties have the patience to be able to identify like what's the best way to communicate in our relationship. And if they can't work through it effectively, then to Sai's point, maybe see a counselor or a life coach or a therapist. But both parties have to be willing to make the communication work. And I know we talked about even being considerate of the phrase, I am who I am, this is who I am. And it is important, as we discussed, to really think about just because you are who you are doesn't mean there's not areas to grow or to change based on where you are and what you want to be. So I will say this. I used to always say that, like, I'm not a morning person. And for years, if you ask my mom, she's going to tell you that as a kid, like, I didn't want to get up in the mornings. I was very slow, probably grouchy. And it's so funny because my nephew moves very slow and wants to sleep. He moves slow, and it's like a little bit of a struggle to get him up. But recently and over the last several years, I started to accept that I'm speaking that into existence. So I no longer say I'm not a morning person. I just identify with, you know what, I move really slow in the mornings. So I have to give myself enough time to get myself going, whether that's coffee, even when I'm working. Like I put a certain time that I block off at the beginning of my day. That gives me time to get like adjusted to waking up, having my coffee, and getting ready for the workday. So, to the point of, this is who I am, as we discussed, it is so important not to speak that into existence and then not being open to really changing that and identifying that just because we were raised a certain way or we think a certain way about ourselves doesn't necessarily mean that it's right, and doesn't mean that that really is who we are and we should let it define us, because you may meet someone who those ways just are not compatible for them. And if you are open to actually changing it, or having a different mindset and a viewpoint of what that looks like on the outside looking in, then you may, you could miss out on a really good opportunity or relationship with someone. Because I made a really good comment about when you trust the person, like naturally your guard will start to come down. And I do think that is true. I think it could be different time frame for all of us. Some may let their guards down sooner than others, but if you're with someone that you truly trust and you respect and they're creating that environment for you, then I do believe that you will be more comfortable to let that guard down. Now, Lex made a really, really good comment that I agree with, and I've said in the past, no one's going to love you like you can love yourself. And I would always say, nobody's going to do Jessica like Jessica can do Jessica. Nobody's going to treat Jessica like Jessica can treat Jessica. And I think that is so true, because we should have this love for ourselves where we would do everything to make ourselves a priority and make ourselves happy. But when we think about being with a partner, to have those same expectations of them, it it's probably unrealistic, because if you're pouring into yourself with self-love and taking care of yourself, that could be very high. But you want someone who does love you and make you feel like dang, they do me just as good as I would do myself, right? But it's never going to be exactly the same. This next topic that came up within the conversation was so powerful to me, and a takeaway, and definitely something I can learn, as the guys talked about really being vulnerable and opening up to women, and women creating that safe space, right? So them trusting the women and being vulnerable and being able to share certain things, but not feel like it's going to be thrown back to them and thrown back at them. And I have seen men, and this is just in different, podcasts or YouTube videos, or even social media, where men talk about not wanting to be vulnerable with their partner because it's going to be thrown back at them. And for me, it's important to understand what that looks like, because maybe as women, and men may, I want to focus really on the men, but as women, we're not aware of when we do it. And I know that I've been accused of doing it. Now, I didn't take it as throwing it back at the individual. I was using it as a reference to try to share, to make a point of what I was comparing between the two instances, specifically between myself and the person that I was dating, because it was very similar situations. But it felt like I wasn't given the same grace, and then it was in turn said that I was throwing it back at them. So even that conversation, I'm like, all right, not in that instance could I have done a better job. But moving forward, like really thinking about when I create that space, and if there's a conversation where we're in a disagreement, not making it seem as if I'm throwing it back at that individual and trying to intentionally hurt my partner. So I thought that was a really good conversation, a topic that we had, that, men will get guarded and never open up again to us. And it's interesting to hear that, because it made me think, would that individual stay with you if at some point you rejected them or shut them down? Would they still stay in the relationship with you, knowing that you no longer created this safe space where they can be vulnerable with you and feel like they trust you enough with their heart and their thoughts? So really good. I also love that MJ talked about like just something as little as how are you doing? Are you okay? And it made me just personally reflect like, okay, did I word it that way? Or did I think I was doing it based on how I was communicating, and maybe I could have done it more? And this is an opportunity to point fingers of what I did wrong or what women are doing wrong. But I think all of this is such self awareness of, is this an area of opportunity where I can do better in my next relationship? As I've taken the last couple of years to really focus on myself, which is important. And I didn't spend time, okay, what can you do better in your next relationship? Because it was important to get back to Jessica. So as I'm listening even to these episodes and then thinking about being in those conversations, it does make you self-reflect. Like, was there something I could have done better? Or next time I'll be more intentional, because I know that as men and women, especially Black men and women, we have a lot going on. And both partners should be checking in just as something as simple. Are you doing good? Are you doing okay? And we even talked about women being more effective communicators naturally, but on both ends, I think it's important that if we're in a relationship and if you feel like so positive affirmations is a love language. And if you need positive affirmations, it's okay to share that. But then also, when it's something, when it comes to just the checking in, if you feel like you're not getting it, yes, some people we would assume would just know to do that. But if you're not getting it and you know that your partner is capable of it or is doing it in other ways, but not quite, the how are you doing today? How was your day? I personally don't see anything wrong with that. And because maybe that's what you need, that little push for the day. So as a woman, I'm sharing that, if my partner felt that way, hey, I'm open to it and I would be receptive to that feedback. The next topic that we got into was one that I'm pretty passionate about, and you probably picked that up in this video, but Caleb made a point about, women seeing their mothers, basically having to take care of the household or being on survival mode, and the effects that it has on us as women. And I think that goes for women and men. For women, my parents divorced, but my mom was my primary caregiver. So like she's the one who raised me and my sister as a single mom. She was a single mom. I have other siblings, but she raised my sister and I primarily. And when you think about survival mode, a lot of us who may have seen that, whether that was a single mother, a mother who lived in the house with the father or a partner, and still there was that survival mode, it does make women, seeing that, I would think, because I can relate to it, like you want to go that much harder so that you can do things differently, you can have more, you can change it for the next generation. There's so many things that come into play with that, especially if you feel like it was a survival mode. Me personally, there's some things that like I don't want to experience again from my childhood. So I'm very intentional about doing certain things. But also on the flip side of that, I think that it pushed women. Okay, when you think about they saw their mother and she was on survival mode, it pushed women. But I think with men, it has created this perception that women should just work just as hard as their mother did when she was on survival mode. And I've actually shared this with a guy before, when he, shared all these things that he wants his wife to do and what his girlfriend should do, and not really relying on him so much because of what he saw his mom. And I'm like, I guarantee you, your mom didn't want to do those things. She did it because she was your mother. She had to take care of you, but she didn't want to have to do those things. And it was a part of survival mode. She had to make it happen. So I think that goes both ways for men and women, the impact that it has. And, as a woman who, grew up with my mom, being a single mom, I get it. Like I know exactly how it pushed me to be that much more stronger, definitely independent. Like Sai said, on in the discussion, like I'm not going around waving a flag, Miss Independent, but it did create me to be this way. And my sister as well, I think it also applies to her. But because of that, yes, I feel like had to go that much harder. But on the flip side, when it comes to men, they have this perception where we should be just like their mom, or they may not have that provider, leader, protector mindset, or say they do, but in reality, the things they're expecting you to do is basically functioning off of survival mode. So I love that that came up. And then also we talked about finances and how that makes a man feel, and making sure that you don't make him feel less than. And I had quite a bit of a discussion around this, but what I will say is, I have gone through this conversation with my therapist, and I've talked about it with friends too. But if I date a guy who makes less than I do, the mindset is so important, because I have created a lifestyle for myself, and it's a lifestyle that I can maintain. So if I meet someone, I'm not expecting that I have to significantly downsize, significantly reduce the lifestyle that I've created. Now, I had a girlfriend who shared, when you have children, there's some things that you have to compromise, and you may not do the same as what you did when you were single. But in reality, if I've created this lifestyle for myself, I want to be with someone who we can maintain it, and not only maintain it, like we get more, right? I said that in episode one, like, or this episode, I want more. Like, it's got to be that more for me. So dating someone who makes less, am I open to it? Yes, but it's very intentional about the conversations and understanding where they are, because he could be much better than I am with money, and has lots of money saved. He's investing, he has passive income, he's done very well for himself financially and positioned himself where he can be a provider of the household, which is so important to me. Now, I know another topic came up about the career that individual can be in. And here's my thing, for me personally, if you love what you do, I think that's great. I never want to take someone away from what they're passionate about and their purpose. But if it is a job that, would significantly reduce the lifestyle that I've built and not allow us to position ourselves to create generational wealth and leave a legacy for our children, then yes, like I would have an issue with that, because I want to do more than what I was, at the position that I was as a child. But then also, the growth mindset piece is so important. I had a friend, mention to me that they know people who have certain professions that they are happy with, and they don't want to do any more than that. And there is nothing wrong with that. But for me, I think there's nothing wrong with me saying that person's not a good fit for me, because we're on two different pages about what we want. And we kind of got into also spend some time talking about just even the finances of a guy, and him feeling like, maybe that the perception would be that he's broke because he doesn't have the money. And it was mentioned even, maybe handing the guy money on a date so that he's paying for it. And, as you can hear my response, I believe that if you don't want, and this is something I've shared with guys, if you are not financially in a place to date, then don't date me, because I do want somebody who will date me. And dates can be a lot of things. I'm not opposed to free dates. There's so many things that we can do and have a good time. But I do want to be courted. And if we are dating and you financially are not in a place, then that's a conversation that we need to have. But to make him feel comfortable, I'm not comfortable giving any man money and handing the money to say, okay, you'll pay for the date. I would like a guy to, and if he's budgeting, so I've heard people talk about what's in their budget and maybe the certain date's not. So say that like he's at his budget for the month, and it's our day to go on a date. We've already agreed or something, or spontaneously. There are so many things that we can do, but as a woman who's looking for a provider and a protector and a leader, I can't see myself handing a man money to be able to say at a restaurant, hey, you pay for it so it doesn't look a certain way. And that's why I shared that. I want to set the expectation of what I want as a provider and a leader. And I know dating someone who makes less, it's not necessarily that that individual cannot afford to take me out and court me. That may not necessarily be the case. But again, if they're at their budget for the month and they don't, it's not in that budget, and I can appreciate it because they probably budget better than me, then let's have that conversation. But if it's just flat out, you don't have the financial means to actually date outside of your own obligations, then more than likely I'm probably not the right person for that individual. And it goes back to where I am in life, my age, and the expectations I have for a partner, because I would expect that person to have expectations for me, right? Everything that I desire from a partner, I can give to myself. And I just want to make sure that when Caleb mentioned about teamwork, as a team, we're coming that much stronger. And that's why I have those expectations and standards for myself and the partner that I have a relationship with. So it may sound, I don't know, it may have sounded a little harsh when I was like, I'm not giving my money. But the reason why is because if you feel like you're at a place where your funds are low, one, I don't want to know that, right? As my man, like, and the guys talked about, they don't share everything. Just plan something else. There's so many things that we can do that you don't have to spend $100, $200, whatever the case is, or even $50. There's so many things that we can do and have a really good time. But I also think it is so important for a guy to not depend on just a woman to plan the dates. Like, that's where the creativity and thought comes from him to be able to plan something fun, and that's within his budget. But the financial piece that we discussed, salaries is a great topic right now. It's very important to have it. And also when you think about getting engaged and being married, we want to have that conversation about salaries before. I think it's important before you talk about engagement, and I know some couples counseling, specifically at churches, finances are discussed, salaries are discussed. So why not have that conversation, let the person know? But you definitely don't want to move too soon with that. But that is something that's important because you want to know where that person stands prior to you getting married. You got to know what you're getting into, because you I know we talk about different accounts, but somebody has, certain debts, student loans, or their salary is maybe, much lower than yours or even much higher. You still want to make sure that you have those conversations, but it is okay for women to desire a guy to make more than they do. I would love to have someone who made what equivalent to what I make or more, because that lets me know that we'll be comfortable. We'll be able to buy a house, to travel. I pray for and want kids. So being able to provide our kids a certain lifestyle, and they'll be able to experience travels and sports, anything that they want. We're not going to be restricted because of finances. So I personally do desire to be with someone who makes what I want or more. And as I stated in the video, it's okay for women to want that too, that also desire that, because to Sai's point, when you have a man that makes less, I personally have experienced resentment, insecurities, and trying to create situations and disagreements, and it really will come down to them trying to chip away at your confidence because you make more than them and you have a certain title, and you may never actually intentionally make this person feel less than, or you may never throw out what you have, but because of their own insecurities and where they think they should be, or that they should be the one making more, it'll happen. Like it will happen. Their mindset will try to bring you down. And that's why I think it's a fine line when it comes to that. And you really have to take the time to get to know someone who makes less, because on both sides, either the person is, you could be insecure, or the person is an amazing guy and that's your husband. But from my experience, you gotta know, because the guy will start resenting you and he will try to find ways to chip away at your confidence. And at the end, you could even be questioning yourself. And that, a lot of time, is the goal. Overall, on this week's episode, I agreed that there are gender roles, and to the point that MJ made, that it's important to also compromise, because it's not black and white. And times have definitely changed since the gender roles that may have been in place since our grandparents. So, say for instance, my husband, or the guy that I'm dating, but I'm going to speak to my husband because that's my goal. My husband cooks really well, and that's his thing. That's what he wants to do. Well, traditionally, people may think that that's the woman's job. So I think it's definitely important to know the strengths of each individual, and really like allowing the person to capitalize on that, but having those conversations, and being open that it's not black and white. Only I wash the dishes. I'm gonna have to say, let him take out the trash, because I hate to take out the trash now. But no, all jokes aside, like really having that conversation that everybody's washing dishes, everybody's cleaning. It's not just the woman's job. So I really think it is important to have those conversations, to be able to identify what the role of each individual is. But I do agree that my primary ask of anyone that I date, and for my future husband, is that individual wants to be a provider, a protector, and a leader, and play that role for our household, because I want to be able to allow him to lead, but he has to create an environment where I can submit. So we talked a little bit about submission. So Caleb mentioned not only the woman submitting, but him submitting too. So creating an environment where I can embrace my femininity and I can respect him as my husband and his masculinity. And it's so important for, I think, the husband to set the tone and create that environment for his wife, because we also talked about teamwork, and Caleb mentioned, he wants a team player and he wants to be able to bring ideas, and she can provide feedback. And Kim mentioned being able to build up her partner. But I think the most important piece between that conversation is really being a team player, which I'm all for that. When it comes to relationships, and specifically, marriage, you want to be a team player, and it is important. But also, like, you supporting your husband to the point where he can bring those ideas to you, and he knows that you'll listen, and you're either going to be honest and say, "Oh, I don't think it's a good idea," or you're right on board with him. So I think teamwork is important, but it is also important for the husband to create that environment where the woman can respect his masculinity. And a lot of that does come from, somewhat gender roles, but then also if there are insecurities due to not making the same salary or whatever it may be, because women today are like, we're doing it. And Caleb mentioned like social media and what that looks like in the influence. And I do think there are some social media influences, but a lot of us, like, this is how we were raised. We were raised to do this. So we're responding based on how we were raised. And that's why I said in the other video, don't just discredit or count a woman out because she is leading with her accomplishments. That may be all she knows. That's the only thing that would be a topic of conversation or get her recognized in her family. So she leads with that because that's the norm for her. So really great episode. I love that we spent a lot of time really discussing communication and how important it is to communicate with your partner, to understand your partner and what they desire as far as the communication. And one of the most important pieces that I think was said tonight was, we attract where we are. And I believe that was MJ. And I cannot agree with that. I cannot agree with that more than what I'm agreeing now, because, over the last 2 years, I've been single, really focusing on, myself and the person I am today, I feel like I would, if I met my husband, I want him to meet me where I am today. If I met him 2 years ago, he wouldn't have been able to get the Jessica I am today. And I pray that I attract somebody who reflects the person I am today. And I think what he said is so important, like the season you are, what you're doing, the energy we give off, how you practice self-love, and the things that you're doing in life, you attract certain people. And now sometimes we attract what's not, a full reflection of us. But to be where you are, and when you attract the right person, it can be a direct reflection. So overall, great episode. I'm looking forward to seeing what the next episode will be about, because we're watching all the videos and things and conversations come together just like you all. So I'm looking forward to seeing the next topic discussion, and then also the feedback that you all are providing, because it looks like you all are really, really enjoying it. And I think that is so important. But thank you for watching my episode 2 recap, and I will see you on the next one.